Hello, this is Supply and Demand, Section A, Markets and Prices lecture. Our prioritized standard is Economic Standard 12, and objectively we're going to demonstrate how the interaction between buyers and sellers determines prices for products. Markets are institutional arrangements that enable buyers and sellers to exchange goods and services. So this is like a farmer's market, I guess. There are many other types of markets. Markets exist wherever buyers and sellers exchange goods or services, with some actually not even having a physical location. So like you can go to Walmart, that's an actual place, but sometimes you might decide to go to Amazon, which isn't really an actual place you can go to, but still considered a market. Some economists claim that what is available in a marketplace is actually determined by consumer sovereignty. Now, consumer sovereignty is the idea that consumers ultimately determine what is produced in a market economy, essentially claiming that if consumers do not want an item, producers will not produce that item. Now, others claim firms take part in demand engineering, where the demand for products is created through marketing techniques of producers. So you could also certainly make the argument that no one was asking for an iPad, no one was asking for an iPhone, no one was asking for an iPod, but essentially marketing techniques were created to convince people that you must have these. You have to have this computer that you walk around with, and no keyboard, it's a must. You have to have it. And at some level, people were convinced that they had to have it. It wasn't something that they were asking for. In actuality, there's probably likely a little validity to both claims. People might not have initially maybe wanted, say, an iPad, but if consumers weren't interested at some level, it probably wouldn't also catch on either. So probably a little accuracy in both. In a market economic system, prices provide information to consumers and producers that encourage efficient production of goods and services that consumers demand. So relative prices actually refers to the price of one good or service compared to the prices of other goods or services. And these relative prices perform three principal functions in a market economy. One of those functions is the information function, which provides you with the information to make an informed decision. So having this information is going to make it a lot easier to go grocery shopping. It's also going to make it easier to choose between two different job offers. It's going to make it easier to hire somebody to paint your house. So this information function is a helpful function because you know what you're getting in a sense. That's usually going to help consumers more. I should probably point that out. The incentive function. This actually gives producers an incentive to increase production when prices rise. So for instance, if this shows you what's happening to the price of corn, well, prices are going up, so that's probably going to give an incentive to corn farmers to produce more corn. If it was going the other direction, then like if you're at this point, it might give you more of an incentive to maybe grow soybeans instead. Now again, incentive function usually benefits, is something helpful for producers, not consumers. And we also have the rationing function. This discourages people from buying something in short supply. So for instance, in theory, a few years back, they were selling the NES Classic Edition, which was like a plug-and-play gaming system that had a lot of nostalgia in it. And in theory, it was $59.99. But if you tried to find one of those, they weren't available anywhere. So in reality, what happened was a few people bought all of these the second they came out, and then they sold them for massive amounts of money, more than what the selling price was. So basically what this does is, if you really want one of these, you can pay this high price for them because there's just not enough of them to go around. If you aren't willing to pay that much, then you'll get something else instead. Maybe you'll go buy a Sega Genesis plug-and-play gaming system because those were in supply. Now, the forces of supply and demand actually help determine prices, which are the measures of the relative scarcity of different products as higher priced items actually tend to be more scarce than lower priced items. So the higher the price of something, the more likely it's not going to be something that's going to be in large supply. So demand, these are the different quantities of a resource, good, or service that will be purchased at various possible prices during a specific time period. So when we talk about demand, this has to do with how consumers think. It's very easy for most people to think about demand because most of the time you are a consumer. A demand schedule is actually a table showing how much consumers are willing and able to buy at all possible prices and is based on the sum of the decisions made by individual consumers in a market. So let's say we're selling Mountain Dew. So possibly if we sell Mountain Dew for $1, maybe we'll find 10 people say, okay, I'll pay $1 for Mountain Dew. I'm really thirsty. If we lower that price to 75 cents, we're going to notice more people interested in purchasing that Mountain Dew. If we lower it again, even more people are probably going to be interested in purchasing that, and we lower that again even more. Okay, so that's our demand schedule. Now, the information in a demand schedule is often represented in what's called a demand curve. It's an easier way to look at this because you can just use your eyeballs. So a demand curve. All right. How this works? Well, the information you had in your demand table or your demand schedule, you basically plot that. So 25 cents. Let me see, for $1, 10 people willing to buy Mountain Dew. If we drop that to 75 cents, now 40 people willing to purchase. We drop it to 50 cents. Now it's 30 people willing to purchase. We drop it to 25 cents, 40 people willing to purchase. And then one more step you have to do for a demand schedule. And Pee Wee Herman used to talk about it. It's called connect the dots, la, 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 connect the dots. And then after you have connected those dots, you name this curve. You name it D for demand because it's a demand curve. Oh, cool. Demand is actually influenced by the law of demand and also the law of diminishing marginal utility. So the law of demand just simply says more of a good or service will be demanded at a lower price than at a higher price. People want less Mountain Dews for $1 than they do for 25 cents. That's basically all the law of demand says. Another economic law is the law of diminishing marginal utility. This one says, as a person consumes additional units of a good or service, eventually the utility, which is a fancy word for satisfaction, gain from each additional unit decreases. So meaning, you have a hamburger. Tasty, I loved it. I had a lot of utility, a lot of satisfaction. Then you have a second one in a row, and it's still good, I like it, but probably not as much as the first. And then you keep going, have a third in a row, you're probably not having as much satisfaction. Certainly not as much satisfaction as the first. So your utility or satisfaction diminishes the more that you have something. Now, a change in the price of a good or service will affect its quantity that is demanded. An increase in demand, there you go, increase in demand. Oh, should point out, price, quantity, the price of something, the amount of something. So in these, I basically just use a generic P for just a generic price. It's a price. And Q is just a generic quantity. It's just what it is. So this is 0. This is a number infinitely higher than 0. This is 0. This is a number infinitely higher than 0. The further you get out here means the more product. The further you get out here, the more product. If you go the other direction, less product, less product. Just in case you don't remember that from math class. Okay, so again, an increase in price results in a decreased quantity demanded. Or in other words, consumers demand less of an item when its price rises. Now, we can also go the other way. A decrease in price, so instead of being here, maybe we drop the price here, results in an increased quantity demanded. So when you drop the price, more people actually want that product now. Now, supply are the different quantities of a resource, good, or service that will be offered for sale at various possible prices during a specific time period. Now, I should point out you have to think a little bit differently when you talk about supply. Supply actually has to do with a producer's ability to produce a product or a producer's willingness to produce a product. Just because people want an item doesn't mean that you can automatically increase the supply for that product. I should point out supply is not quantity. These are two different things. Supply, again, is producers' ability to make. Quantity is how much have they actually made at different price points. A supply schedule is a table showing how much producers are willing and able to sell at all possible prices and is based on the sum of the decisions made by individual producers in a market. So maybe for a quarter, producers are only willing or able to produce 10. If you raise that price to 50 cents now, they might decide, well, I'm going to make a lot more now. I'm willing to make more or able to make more. You raise that again to 75 cents. Then, again, we might be talking about that Mountain Dew. They're going to be willing to make probably even more. If you jack that price up to $1, hey, we are willing to make even more. We would love to make more the higher the price gets. So the information in a supply schedule is often represented in what's called a supply curve. Okay, so this is very similar to what we did when we made a demand curve. So again, you take the information in your supply schedule. So for a quarter, they're willing to produce 10 Mountain Dews. We raise that price to 50 cents. Now they're willing to produce about 20. Raise that price to 75 cents. They're willing to produce about 30, raise that price again to $1. Now they're willing to produce about 40. And then our last step is Pee Wee says, connect the dots, la, 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 connect the dots. We have one more step we need to do. We need to tell people what curve this is. S for supply. That is a supply curve. Now, while supply is actually variable in the long run, in the short run, supply is actually influenced by the law of supply and also the law of diminishing returns. The law of supply, this is a pretty basic one. This says more of a good or service will be supplied at a higher price than at a lower price. So the lower the price, the less they want to produce. The higher the price, the more they want to produce. Simple enough. Okay, the law of diminishing returns. This is kind of long. I'll try to explain it. This says adding one resource, possibly labor, to all the other resources will only increase productivity up to a point. And after that point, productivity will diminish. Okay, so let me try to explain. So let's say you're at Hardee's, you want to produce more product, so you hire more workers. Hire more workers is going to result in more product. But if you keep continuing to hire more and more workers, at some point you're going to hit a point where it doesn't increase as much to keep hiring additional workers. And then if you keep hiring workers even beyond that point, you're actually going to start to see negative product because you essentially have too many workers, not enough jobs. So you're actually making less and less money if you keep continuing to add more and more inputs to your production. That's what that means in a sense. A change in the price of a good or service will affect its quantity that is supplied. So an increase in price, so higher than the original, results in an increased quantity supplied. So producers will supply more of an item when its price rises. Go the other way, a decrease in price results in a decreased quantity supplied. So producers supply less of an item when its price falls. So if you've noticed, this is the complete opposite of how things are when we talk about demand. Now, the intersection point of supply and demand actually denotes the equilibrium price or an equilibrium quantity. So equilibrium price is the price where the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. So at this point, this is the price where quantity demanded, quantity supplied are the same. If you're ever looking for the equilibrium price and you don't know where to find it, X marks the spot. So that's where you find it. And then from this point, equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity. Notice this little star, this means equilibrium price. It's just so you know that it's not just a generic rate, just a generic price. Now, equilibrium price represents an ideal point where consumers demand all the products that producers are supplying. The equilibrium price will actually persist as long as other things remain constant. While the equilibrium price is the point where markets function most efficiently, it is not uncommon actually for consumers to pay for or for producers to charge prices that are higher or lower than the equilibrium price. This is just the ideal point. All right, that was supply and demand, section A, markets and prices. Sorry for the length. Our prioritized standard was economic standard 12. Objectively, you can now demonstrate how the interaction between buyers and sellers determines prices for products.